Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have bassist Jimmy Hendricks with us. How you doing today, Jimmy?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So getting right into your story, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
So I had a very musical childhood. Both my parents were songwriters in the 60s and 70s, way back.
Very
And they kind of had music careers, like I said, in what we called secular music back in the day. And then they found the Lord. And I was born. They had two sons from previous marriages. They found God. I was born, and we started the Hendricks Family Praise Band.
Oh, really?
And basically, my whole life, we toured around either in a bus or a motorhome, and our family job was just going from church to church all across the United States and playing Christian music, all like, some original stuff and then some praise and worship stuff. Which you may not understand that if you're not in the Christian world at all, but that's kind of where I came up. And so I did, I was touring on the road doing nothing as a baby. And then when I was 5, I started playing drums with the family band. So I did that. Basically, let's see, I was like 15 years old, I guess, is when we were out on tour. My mother, who is the lead singer of the band, had some stomach pains, which was, kind of weird. And so we canceled a few shows we had, went home. And not to get too sad too fast, but we found out she had cancer. And
Wow.
3 months later, she died.
Oh.
And so at that point, the family band kind of obviously fell apart. There was a lot of emotions running around, especially being a, Christian band. And when she got sick, there was a lot of prayer. Everyone thought she was gonna heal, and she didn't. So that was definitely a huge turning point in my life, because I didn't know, even though I was a young kid, and gosh, I'm sorry, I was 12 when that happened, not 15. I was very young. It was like 6 years into playing with the family band. So at that point in my life, the touring stopped. I went into normal school, and I just, kind of lived a normal life at that point. From then on, my senior year of high school, I moved down to Florida, Orlando, Florida, I was 16. I was really young in school. So I graduated down in Florida. I moved down there to play with this Christian band that was playing in Orlando. And they were doing this kind of more modernized music. And so I did that for a few years. That went really well. And then I was playing for the big church in town. It was like Orlando, First Baptist Orlando is what it was called. And, they had 10,000 members to this church, and it had a 5,000 seat auditorium. They did 2 services every Sunday night. It was a big church. And they would bring concerts in to the auditorium, Christian concerts. And my favorite band at the time, all I listened to was Christian music. I didn't even know who Jimmy Hendricks was, because I had never, so when people would be like, did your parents name you after Jim? I'm like, well, my dad's Jim, I'm Jimmy. I didn't get it. Right. Obviously I get it now. But so my favorite Christian group at the time was this group called Reality Check. And they were kind of like a funk, rock, rap, singing, this is late 90s. So it was kind of the in thing. Everyone was wearing polyester and stuff, trying to bring back the 70s.
Yeah.
And they brought that band to our town in Orlando. And our youth pastor, who I knew, kind of knew one of the guys in the band. Long story short, their bass player was leaving the band. And I was like, hey, I love this group. I wonder if there's any way they could, hear me play bass. So long story short, we set it up to where me and the main church drummer would be jamming when Reality Check arrived on their tour bus.
Oh, cool.
So they arrive, they hear me playing, and this part's kind of like a movie almost. They came up to me, they're like, hey man, your bass playing is really good. You want to try out? You know, it wasn't like that, but you know, that's how it felt. Those weren't the words. And I was like, yeah, of course. You know, and so I came back for their sound check that evening. I'm nervous. At the time, I weighed about 265 pounds, very overweight kid, kind of went into a little bit of overeating after my mom passed. And obviously I've gotten over that now and was able to lose the weight. But at the time, I was just this awkward 19-year-old kid who my favorite band in the world was about to listen to me play bass at their sound check. So I was very nervous. And, but you know, I knew some of their songs because I'd listened to it. So like I said, I'm long-winded. Anyways, long story short, Nathan Barlow, who I know you've interviewed on here, was the lead singer of Reality Check.
Right. Yeah.
And that was his first, like, you know, record deal or whatever out of college. And so I ended up, that's when I first met Nate. And yeah, we toured for I guess only about a year and a half. And then he broke off and did Luna Halo, which I played with them for a while in that, and then went over to, I basically bounced around a lot of different Christian bands for quite a while. And they kind of had a point where I just said, you know what, I'm burnt out. I need to take some time off. I've been doing music my whole life. So I took a 7-year hiatus from touring, from playing, from doing anything. And I actually worked for Apple, got really geeky, nerdy into Apple computers, and was like making cases for them in China and doing all sorts. I worked for a local Apple reseller in Nashville. And so they had a little more leeway in what I could do. It wasn't like corporate Apple, even though we, you know, sold all the Apple stuff. They were called Apple specialists. So I worked there for 7 years. You know, my only Apple experience was I used Pro Tools in the studio. So I kind of knew how to like start them and do a little bit of stuff, but learned that pretty fast, ended up moving up through the company, and then got super burnt out on that. And so I was like, you know what, I really feel like I've got to do music again. I was starting to get panic attacks and on medication because the Apple job was very stressful, a lot of hours. But I was kind of like, that's all my life was just that. I maybe had a day off every week. And I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. But 7 years removed from music, you don't know any of the same people, really. I mean, you do know, I knew some of the same guys, like Nate, obviously, who's playing with Keith Urban now, which I'm sure you know. And, you know, we kind of kept in contact over the years, but, you know, I hadn't really been involved in anything. So I found a guy, the girl I was dating at the time had a best friend who had a husband actually that was trying to start a band. And so we got together, we talked. He was this really cool country dude and was like, man, I want to do some country music. And I was like, I'm interested in that too. And so we just started this little duo, and basically we're doing just cover tunes, and we started playing at little bars around Nashville. And I'm trying to remember the actual order of all this. So after that happened, there's a guy named Chris Hitchcock, who is a singer-songwriter who basically did cover shows. We were doing 4-hour Tin Roof sets and played all the tin roofs across the Southeast, and just toured in a Sprinter van with no trailer, threw all our crap in the back, and just played 4-hour sets at, like I said, and it wasn't just tin roofs. There was, you know, World of Beer. There were a lot of different venues that we played around, but Tin Roof was kind of like the primary one. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then my brother, who's a sound man, was running sound for a group. Have you heard of Everett? They're another country band that's out right now. They're kind of new. But before they were Everett, Brent Rupert, one of the singers, was kind of doing an artist thing. And so my brother was running sound for them. They brought me in, and I started singing and playing mandolin actually with them, because that's one of my bass is my primary thing. But my dad was a mandolin player, so I kind of grew up messing around, noodling on it enough to play. You know, we did like a 3-piece harmony. It was acoustic guitar, mandolin, and a dobro. And you know, it's kind of like they still do now with their music, but it was just a 3-piece. And we went around and we did a tour with Lone Star, I think it was. You know, this is like a few years back, so they were kind of, you know, further along in their career, but it was still, for us, it was like, heck yeah, Lone Star, this is awesome. And you know, kind of went out and did that. That was a lot of fun. At the time, Anthony, who is the guitar guy from Everett, was playing in a lot of bands like we do in Nashville, because you just kind of have to, when people are up and coming, there's not really enough shows to justify just playing with one person. So you take what you can get to try and keep the bills paid.
Right.
So Anthony was playing with a bunch of people besides Brent. One of those people was Jameson Rodgers, and this is about 6 years ago now, because I know my time frames all over the place, because I'm probably twice most of the people's age that'll listen to this. But anyways, so yeah, Anthony was playing with Jameson, and Mark DeJanes and Luke DeJanes, who are currently the drummer and bass player for is Walker Hayes the Applebee's?
Yeah, Walker Hayes.
Yeah, so they're playing with him now. At the time, they were Jameson's bass player and drummer.
Oh, okay.
Well, and Mark, who was the drummer, was playing a gig. And long story short, I keep saying that, Anthony said, "Hey, can you come sub in with Jameson?" And this is before Jameson had a record deal or had anything going on. He was literally just coming, he'd been in Nashville for maybe 4 years. And so I played a few shows with him, and then that was it. And he kind of went on through his career doing stuff. I think I subbed in one more time. And, I was playing with so many people. His wife, Sarah Allison Turner, is another artist, Jameson's wife in Nashville, singer-songwriter. I was playing with her, was playing with Brent Rupert from Everett, and just pretty much whatever gigs I could get. And then I guess 4 years ago now, Jameson was like, "Hey man, Mark's going to do another gig. Would you be interested in going full time?" And so I was like, "Heck yeah, man." Because I've always been a real big fan of Jameson's personality and attitude, as far as being an artist. Because a lot of times, being a player and not part of a band, it's your job to play the music, but also kind of maybe take a little more than your average amount of crap from the artist that's paying you, right? Because they're your boss, just like you would any boss. Yeah. And different artists can have personalities all over the place, but Jameson's the most down-to-earth person that I've ever met that is also an artist. He's from Mississippi. He's really cool as far as how everything's run. All the guys in the band are married, so we don't have any kind of crazy, backstage parties or anything. I mean, we still have fun. There's just not any random people there that we don't know. Right. But so, and being married myself, having 2 kids, it just seemed like a good fit. And this is, like I said, before the record deal happened. And then, all the Luke Combs stuff happened. We went on tour with him. We were doing radio tour, flying all over the country to different places and, different radio stations. And then, Cold Beer Calling My, Some Girls came out, that went number 1. Cold Beer Calling My Name came out, that went number 1. And so it was just kind of like, mind you, most of that happened during the pandemic. So we didn't really get to play like a show where Some Girls was a number 1 song till like a year after it was number 1, basically, just because of the pandemic, and we weren't having shows. The timing just kind of worked out that way. So then, and since then, after the Luke Combs stuff, we've just been kind of touring around, did some stuff. We did Luke Bryan's farm tour at the end of last year, which was a lot of fun, and did some shows with Darius Rucker, and then a lot of just headlining shows or whatever at different clubs and venues. And like I told you earlier, we're really excited to be going on the Hardy tour coming up this spring. Totally. Jameson and Hardy are old friends, and I've known Hardy for a long time too. My best friend is Hardy's cousin and his publisher. And so, I saw him hanging out with Jesse, who's my buddy back in the day before, anybody knew who he was. And, you could always see that he was talented, but I didn't really hang out with him that much. And then he starts writing songs, and I start going, man, for someone who didn't come up in country music, I came up, in the Christian thing, and then I kind of went into like funk and jazz, and was into like playing as many notes as I could on the bass, that I could get away with. So I kind of became a busy player. And then, it was definitely adjustment getting into country music, and, being able to, country's got a lot of fun bass, but some of the older country stuff especially just has very basic bass. And so I had to learn to enjoy the beauty in whole notes and filling out a part and being part of a group instead of it being the, hey, it's Jimmy show, because that's kind of how I was when I was younger. So I think, so for me I kind of lost my train there, but for me coming up in the funk and different styles, when I heard Hardy stuff, which was country, which wasn't my favorite at the time, I started, man, he was using different sing, as you know, like that syncopated rhythm that he does when
Right.
he sings in his songs. And then anytime you hear a song on the radio, you're like, oh yeah, Hardy wrote that.
Right.
And if not, someone's copying Hardy,
Mhm.
because that's his thing. You can hear when he did it. And so I was always like, I really like that. And then, obviously he's had an amazing career, and he's a great dude too, that's actually down to earth and country. And I think people see that, and that's why they like it. It's not like he's some dude from California
Yeah.
that didn't grow up. Now, mind you, there's a ton of people in California love country music. I mean, some of the biggest shows we play are away from the coast. There's a ton of farmland and a ton of people that are country, but it's he's not a city boy that's grabbed an accent and trying to trying to be country or whatever, that has a good voice. So it's nice
Right.
to see actual country dudes writing about country stuff that they actually did.
No, for sure. So kind of going back to your childhood a little bit, having two parents that are songwriters, artists, do you have any memories of kind of being around any other big songwriters or artists that were kind of maybe coming around the house to work with your parents at a young age?
I have a yeah, this is not so much a an instance where they were riding with the famous person, but we were doing a uh, Phil Driscoll as a trumpet player. He was
Okay.
really big in the Christian world. He kind of like he sang almost. He had like a very gravelly voice, but played trumpet. It was like this thing in Christian music. We were doing uh, a record with him out in Los Angeles. So we're out in L.A. and I think I'm probably 7 or 8 years old. Just started playing drums with the band. I was not playing on the recording. They had the big LA session guys, to play on the recording. So I was hanging out in just like the waiting area that had a little Pac-Man video game and, food, just kind of like the lounge.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in there. I remember with these two guys, both had, long hair, and they're just sitting watching TV. And I walk up to him, and super Christian kid. That's all I knew. And
Right.
I walk up to this guy and I go, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And then the guy's like, "Well, I'm not sure, son." And I was like, "But do you believe Adam and Eve?" And he was like, "Man, I just don't know." And I started like witnessing to these two dudes, telling them about Jesus. And I remember my dad coming in going, "Jimmy, Jimmy, no, 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 no," and going, "I'm sorry, guys, I'm really sorry," and like pulling me out. I didn't find out till years later it was Eddie Van Halen and Sammy Hagar that I was witnessing to.
No way.
And yeah, in the studio lounge. So that's probably the biggest. You can't really top that story with anything else. And my I don't know if you familiar with the Mamas and the Papas at all?
Oh yeah, yeah,
They're
for
an
sure.
old school.
Hmm.
All right. Well, my dad's first music foray was a group called the Big Three, and it
Hmm.
was him, Denny Doherty, and Mama Cass from the Mamas and Papas.
Cool.
And so they did the same kind of thing the Mamas and Papas did. They were a folk singing group, and long story short, I think it was to. I'm not sure. For some reason, my dad and Mama Cass had to get married. I think it had something to do with draft. The record label wanted him to do it. And so my dad's first wife was Mama Cass of the Mamas and Papas. And there's, all sorts of stuff on the internet about them. So his ties there. And then, one of their biggest things that he did with Cass before she went on to the Mamas and Papas was and he was always so proud to tell people that they were opening up on tour for Bill Cosby.
Mhm.
And so lately, that's a story that you don't really want to tell
Right.
because of the stuff that's come out. So
Yeah.
I was just thinking how ironic it is. That was a great story to tell a few years ago. And now, that never happened. I didn't go on tour with Bill Cosby. What are you talking about? Just kidding. But
That's funny.
so yeah. I can't really think of any other. My mom wrote with Sonny and Cher,
Mhm.
but that was before I was born, so I wasn't really around with that. And as far as in the Christian world, pretty much everybody that was big back. We were out with the Gaithers. I think one of my first like big arena shows was I was 6 years old and I was playing an electronic drum set. It was us, Take Six, Sandy Patty, and the Gaithers,
Mhm.
and they were like all the big Christian groups at the time. It was the Hoosier Dome in Indiana, packed out, and for some reason that's just one show that kind of sticks out in my head, just because it was like I remember playing the electronic drum set was very odd compared to a real drum set. And
Right.
being a child that hadn't been playing that long, having everything all of a sudden feel different, and having all these people staring at the kid that's playing the drums, it was a lot of stress and pressure. But I just remember meeting those people, and back then, like Bill Gaither, Sandy Patty, and Take Six, which were kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they were kind of like Christian Boys to Men.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that's basically what they did. But yeah, I think that's probably the most like famous people scenarios that I can think of right now.
Very cool. Now moving on to, we mentioned Nathan Barlow, super awesome guy, very talented. What's it like working with a young Nathan Barlow when you first joined that band?
Um, it was honestly very intimidating.
Hmm.
Like I said, I was kind of overweight young kid, and these were all like graduated from college, in shape, had the cool hair, cool clothes, everything was already kind of in place.
Hmm.
And you know, he was never like, he was very nice to me, you know. I mean, to this day, he and I are very good friends. So it wasn't anything that he did. It was just being the youngest, newest, never done this before. It was very intimidating at first. But, you know, I would say young Nate Barlow is the same as old Nate Barlow, just with a few less gray hairs, just like me. um, but yeah, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, he's always had an amazing voice, been super talented. He was really into Radiohead back then,
Yeah.
and so I think because of him, I got super into Radiohead and kind of went down that path. And I'm very glad I did, because to this day, some of those older records, you know, hold a big place in my heart. Probably because I was young. Everybody thinks their music's the best of their generation,
Yeah.
and I come to find out now that I have two little kids that it's all about what touches you first.
Hmm.
What you connect with on a level, even if it's just the level because your parents hate it, or if it's because the music actually moves you in an emotional way. I think that's what makes music your favorite music. So I think, thanks to Nate and that whole experience, he was the lead singer. There were four guys that all kind of sang, but they definitely gave me a shot. The first people to ever give me first person to give me a shot was Nathan, as far as on a professional level. So that's something I, could never thank him enough for.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it was cool. I mean, I didn't, like the first couple of shows we were out with DC Talk, and the guys from DC Talk come on the bus, and I'm like, what the crap? I mean, you got to understand,
Complete
when you're in
legends.
Christian music, yeah, those guys are freaking, and this is like at the prime of their, you know, we're doing Creation Fest with Newsboys, and who else was like Audio Adrenaline, Newsboys, and then DC Talk were
Mhm.
headlining, and we were before Audio Adrenaline. It was like some big festival, and I just remember like, holy crap! I was literally playing, in front of a big crowd in the church, but mostly like, I'm playing in a church, I'm playing in a youth group room, and now I'm on stage in front of all these people playing with the dudes that I was literally idolizing like months prior. So
Right.
it was a crazy experience. I think if I went back there now, it would be a completely different experience, just because I've been through so much stuff. I probably would have reacted differently to everything.
Right.
But those that's how you kind of, when you learn like how to act as a musician, because you do run across a lot of famous people. And I mean, in country music, I've I've definitely shook hands with, met, or been around pretty much everyone you could name, just
Mhm.
because of touring and doing festivals and doing all that stuff.
Right.
And but at this point, I've done so many music things. There's not like a person out there um, in the current country world now. However, if Gwen Stefani were to pop out and surprise me, that means when she came out, I was like living in Orlando, Florida, which they were from. I was
Mhm.
16 years old. She was hot. She was an amazing singer. She was doing all this crazy stuff with her voice no one had ever done before.
Mhm.
So I think I would be starstruck by her, just because of when, that's like one of my old groups, and like the Radiohead
Right.
guys, I'd probably be starstruck by them.
Mhm.
But being around it for so long, it's just like you meet people now, and they're just a person, they're, and most all of them are cool people. That's the great thing, because I feel like there are a few artists maybe that aren't the greatest people, but I feel like it's only the people that actually are good to the folks around them that make it. Like there's very few, there may be a couple like diva people out there that get an attitude that, but for the most part, it's just, down to earth people. And yeah, just getting to meet them and talk to them and hang out with them is definitely a fun thing.
I'm sure. Now, did Nathan and the other guys in Reality Check, did you ever tell them that you had kind of set up your audition for when they were walking in the sound check, or do they still not know?
I am sure that that came up at some point. Because like I said, his name was Kyle Wall. He was the youth pastor for that big church, and he knew the guys like kind of well, because when they were first coming up, I think they came and played for the church, and he really liked them and was, but he also really liked me, and he was like, man, I see something in you, you're super talented, I want to hook you up with these guys. So I think it was kind of like, you be in there playing, I'm going to mention you to them beforehand, and it will kind of make it a coincidental. So like they knew I was in that town. They knew I played at that church. So it might have been like in their head, this might work out. But them walking in while I was playing was definitely kind of a setup thing on my part. And I'm sure I told them, because we got so close. Because we went from touring around in a bus with Reality Check to touring around in a van with Luna Halo, because it was kind of like, they already had Reality Check had a single and it was doing well and had the record label backing and all that. And so for him to kind of leave that and do something else because of contractual obligations, he had to get out of that deal and do a whole separate deal, for Luna Halo. And it was like starting over basically. But I think, he stylistically wanted to be in a completely different area than the rest of those people. And, this isn't something that he said, but I would think from a business, music business standpoint, if you can reduce the amount of owners in a project where you're doing most of the writing and most of the work, it makes sense, because there were 4 guys on that record deal, and I don't know how much they all contributed to things, but I mean, I feel like some of them were there just for the look of the group, because it was like DC Talk was 3 dudes, and this was like, 1 black dude and 2 white. It was basically kind of like in the shoes of DC Talk. I even think they all went to Liberty University like DC Talk.
Oh,
so
wow.
it was kind of almost imaged in that. And quite honestly, I feel like Nate wanted to go somewhere else musically, which obviously he did with Luna Halo, got into doing more rock stuff and not the kind of hip hop funk. It had a lot of that kind of old school hip hop rap where everything's like that kind of same meter or whatever.
Right.
So I think he just wanted to get away from that, and he was willing to leave the deal and leave all that stuff, to follow what his heart was telling him to do. So, it was an interesting thing to watch him make that decision. And then, he's had a very, very interesting, musical career since then, and is, doing great things now. But yeah.
Cool. And now you touched on Jameson Rodgers just being a great boss, great guy to work with. Do you have a favorite song in the set that comes up every night that you're just hyped to play?
Oh, my favorite song in the set that I'm hyped to play. Wow. And it's good because I actually just went over. So one of my primary things I do with Jameson is singing all the high harmonies.
Okay.
And that's why, like, when we do radio shows, you usually don't send the bass player on a radio thing, but I just play acoustic guitar, and then, we sing the 3-part harmonies, me and the guitar player and Jameson. So I almost feel like I have to look at it like, My Kind of Living, the song he did with Hardy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's like off the Hicks tape. That's one of my favorite ones to play, just because I really like the harmonies in it and just the whole feel of the song. It doesn't really have any kind of a crazy bass line in it, but like I said before, country music in general doesn't have a lot of crazy bass going on. It just kind of is, it's being what it's supposed to be, the bass. It's holding everything up. And not to belittle it, because if you're playing a festival and one of the 2 guitar players stops playing for a split second and then starts playing again, it's not going to do anything. But if all of a sudden the bass stops, you're looking around like, what's going on here? So, you got to keep it into the simple. I don't want to keep harping on simplicity because it's hard and important to be able to play the simple notes consistently and not make any kind of mistakes in those there. But for me, it's become more about singing as far as me doing, showing creativity, I guess, or so it's holding this down while I sing. And I feel like in my kind of living, the dissonant harmonies, how they play off each other, and it's kind of a slow, cool, airy tune. And I think that's probably one of my favorite ones to play. We do an Eagles medley every night, which is Missing One is one of JMO's songs that starts out with the line, I had every Eagles record.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do a 4 Eagles song medley in our live show and then go into Missing One. So
Okay.
that's kind of like an 8-minute chunk of music that is always a lot of fun to play too, because we get to do all these Eagles tunes, which we're all kind of big Eagles fans and have been influenced. Jameson, our guitar player, Adam, and I all are definitely big fans of the Eagles. So that's probably my other favorite moment of the night. And playing Cold Beer and Some Girls is always a lot of fun because you get the biggest crowd reaction out of that. That's everyone knows those songs, and then maybe a smaller percentage knows all like the tracks that aren't on the radio or whatever. So those are the most like exhilarating to play just because everyone's singing the lyrics. You can stop at any point in the song and the crowd's singing along with you. And sometimes with newer songs, especially if you're a newer artist, if someone in the crowd doesn't know, they'll just kind of look off or look at their phone or, see what they're doing. And, being up there, you notice that kind of stuff because you're just kind of, you're just looking over the crowd. And that's one of the hardest things for me is if people start to fight in the crowd. It doesn't happen that often, but it's happened quite a few times in my life. It takes me completely out of the show. And I'm like, I can't stop. For some reason, I cannot stop watching that. So that's the only thing that can still distract me from stage at this point. But yeah, I would obviously the hits and then the My Kind of Living tune and the Eagles medley. That's probably my highlights from like when we do a 90-minute set or whatever.
Yeah. So to close out my interviews, I like to ask all my guests, what's a piece of advice you would give to an aspiring musician that wants to be in your spot in the next couple of years?
Do it for the love of music, not for the fame, not for the money. Not because those don't exist, but those things will never keep you happy. It's only the love of actual music itself that's going to keep you coming back, and you're not going to care about how much the pay is, how much, do I have to ride in a van? Am I on a bus? Are we flying a private jet? Are we on Southwest? None of that stuff really matters if you love music and you love what you're doing. So never lose sight of that. It's something that I've done a few times in my career where I picked gigs up just for money. And, at the end of the day, you got to love the people you're working with and you got to love what you're doing. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is just never lose sight of why you're doing it. It's because of music and not because of all the other crap that comes with music.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.